Welcome. I'm Janelle Kolaski, a career mindset coach and actor.
And I'm Amanda Dubois, a self-authenticity and prosperity life coach and actor as well. And we're your co-host of Mindset Artistry YouTube channel,
where we teach you the art of discovering and using your mindset
to build the career and life you desire.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mindset Artistry. I am so grateful and excited to have our guest here today, Miss Nancy Daniele Berman. We got to work together last summer. She has this amazing tie company and has done so much with her life. Nandani is the name of the company. We're going to get into all of these things. So we're so grateful that you're here with us today. But first, we're going to do a little bio like we always do, and then we're going to jump in. So Nancy Daniele Berman is an entrepreneur with an expansive background in marketing, philanthropy, and most recently, hospitality as the founder of the artisanal cakery Nancy's Fancy Schmancy Cakes. As both a small business owner and mother, Nancy thoroughly believes in giving back and supporting her community through volunteer work for various nonprofits in her hometown of Detroit, Michigan. She was recently appointed by the President of the United States as commission member, U.S. Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad. After decades of work dedicated to helping others, she decided to make a bold move for herself and enter into the fashion industry, a place where her love of both business and creativity thrive. Nancy strives to broaden this viewpoint within the fashion industry. And just like that, the tie reimagined become the ingenuity behind the launch of Nandani, a luxury tie brand whose mission is to inspire confidence through fashion. As the founder, CEO, and creative director of Nandani, Nancy artfully crafts collections of ties in the heart of New York City that are designed for women and worn by everyone. Nandani represents innovation in women's accessories by pioneering a novel approach to women's ties, disrupting a traditionally male-dominated fashion category. The spark of inspiration for Nandani originated when her son was cleaning out his closet and giving away his ties that were made for young boys. They were already tied and the right fit, something women could wear more easily. Whoa, I love this so much here. I don't know where to start. Let's see. I want to jump on the fancy schmancy cakes first, actually, before we get into the ties. Tell me more about that, because that's something that surprised me. I didn't even know that.
Well, so I don't do it anymore because I don't have time, but although for birthdays, they come out eventually, occasionally. So I don't even know how many years ago. I just always, literally since I was in my early 20s, I loved baking cakes, but making them it was kind of like the Cake Boss. You ever watched that show? Okay, so I really didn't watch the show. I've seen it a few times, but I kind of did the same thing. So if somebody wanted, a cake of a truck, I made a physical looking truck. So I was doing this for years, and then people kept asking to buy them. And so eventually, I, said, okay, I'll try it. I'll sell one. And I worked out of my home, and I never advertised because as soon as I posted a cake on Facebook, I'd get calls. And so it was like a fun thing to do while I was at home raising my kids. But it was a lot because sometimes they take 12 hours to make. So I would have to just stay up all night when my kids would go to sleep. But I kind of loved it because it was an amazing creative outlet. And I would, it was the only time I'd put on a movie, usually a musical, because I could, just, I didn't have to concentrate and watch. I could kind of just sing along and paint and create. And I loved it. Yeah, so my kids are very spoiled. They get incredible birthday cakes.
I love that because cakes are always good, but I'm vegan now, so I find it hard to find good tasting cakes. So I'm all about the cakes. So what made you then transition from doing the schmackery cakes to going, hey, I'm going to jump into fashion? And because I know you talked about your son and the idea of the tie, but what was that shift in that moment for you? If you could remember this, you said, I'm going to do this.
So basically, I was doing the cakes for many years, but it was part-time. I was, taking care of 3 kids, and I got divorced. So I was a single mom. And so I was super busy, and I fit the cakes in when I could, but I always wanted to work in fashion. That was my dream since I was a little girl. I've always loved fashion, clothing. I love styling people. I love, when I buy something, I have such appreciation for the way it's made and the inside. I'll wear something and I care more about how the the inside of it looks, and no one else could see it. But I have a lot of appreciation for the tailoring and just, for the craft. So I've always loved clothing. But when I moved to Detroit, when I was right out of college, I was dating my ex then, and there was just no fashion here. And so I just really had to give it up. I mean, I, I would actually design dresses for people sometimes when they were walking down the aisle and they needed to make a bridesmaid dress. People don't do that as much anymore. They buy things. But back in the day when I was getting married, people would like give you fabric and say, make a dress. So we all had to make dresses when we were bridesmaids. So I used to design dresses for people. And so I always just had the fashion bug in me, but I, for years, just kind of had to give it up in terms of as a profession. And then after, like my kids, were getting a little bit older, but I had a very difficult divorce. And when I got legal custody of my children, and when I no longer had to deal with the court system and a lot of things that were, I kind of like was able to like breathe. It was like a long period of time in my life. It's like, 4 or 5 years of just, a lot of difficulties with my ex and the court system. It took over my life that I couldn't really do anything for myself. Once I had that legal custody and I got the idea of the ties, kind of came right after, it was just like, oh my God, I could do something that I want to do now. And that was really the shift. It was more like the timing of it. It wasn't more like, how did I go from cakes to the fashion? It was just, it was the timing of what was going on in my life that freed me up and gave me the will to, say, I'm going to do something for myself. And it like, I felt very empowered at that time to, kind of take on the world at that. So, yeah.
I love how you're speaking to the craft of everything, the craft of making a bridesmaid's dress or taking things apart and seeing the unique pieces of it, or 12 hours that go into making this gorgeous cake. As many times Amanda and I are talking about the craft of acting and really any art. I danced and I played 2 instruments. And we are always talking about the multi-hyphenate creative. I'm always coaching multi-hyphenates, and I was even talking to another model today, and it's okay if there are people out there, they want to do one thing, that's what they want to do with their life, and they become really, really good at that, and that's great. But then there's so many of us that are creatives, and we have all these things that we want to try. And I know at first I was a little discouraged by other people to not be that way and to just choose one thing. So I love how you're bringing up baking the cakes, and then now you have the tie business. And so I'd love to know more about how, you used what you've learned along the way and applied it now, and how you've used that, because sometimes people are afraid to start something new.
So I think a lot of it is timing. You like do what you could do during that time of your life. Like, for instance, I couldn't work in fashion because I moved back when I was in my 20s to Detroit, where it just didn't really exist. So I sort of had to give that up and find other creative outlets. I always throughout my life, even as a child, found different creative outlets. When I was in college, I was a choreographer of our school plays. I danced my whole childhood, so there was always like a different creative outlet for me. Then it became the cakes. When my kids were younger, I did Art Smart. I was in charge of the art program, for the parents to come in and teach about artists after school. So I was always like finding different ways. And when the timing was right in my life, I was able to get back to the fashion. And when I had like, that time where I felt, okay, I wasn't consumed with, my divorce, my kids were getting a little bit older. They were a little bit more self-sufficient, even though even when they get older, they still take a lot of time. But, but it's a different type of thing. They could tie their shoes themselves, and, they're old enough to drive themselves. So I was able to free up some time for myself to do things that I always wanted to do. And so that's one thing that, we've talked about this previously, that I always want to share with people, is that because you can't do something when you're in your 20s and making that decision of what am I going to be when I grow up, just because you don't do that then doesn't mean you can't do it later on. And you shouldn't give up that dream. And I stress that to women, especially because we are in a, if you want to be a mom and you want to have a career, I mean, that is just the most challenging thing. They are both careers. That's how I say it. I mean, being the mothers that stay home and take care of their kids, that's a career in itself. raising kids. I always say, if you were off at your work and you had a nanny at home, that nanny says that that's a career, that's her job. So if you're at home and you're the mother nanny, that's a job. So doing two jobs at the same time is really difficult, as most women do. And so, if you do have to give up a certain type of job because you want more flexibility and you want to, if you have a family at home, then you can do it later on. And that's really, that's what I did. And I'm not saying that everyone, can do it. I know people are scared to change jobs. It's like, it's like exactly what you were saying. People think that they have to do one thing and do it really well. And I know, like, you have so many different things that you do. You're a model, an actress, so many, you're doing this. It's incredible. And I'd say, like, who says we have to do one thing? Like that some people find the one thing they're passionate about and they do it their entire lives. And that's great if that's what they love and that's what they want to do. But I feel like you could try 10 different things in your lifetime. We have a lifetime is long, hopefully. There's many, many years and you could do so many different things. And I think people shouldn't be scared of failure. And, I think people are so scared of failure that they hold back from trying anything new. And who cares if something doesn't go well? Then you go on to the next thing. That's my thought.
I relate to that so much. I feel, particularly as women, we have this like stigma that, we're just meant to be this one thing that we can do, like you said, and we can't do anything other. Or we have to give up something or sacrifice something in order to get the thing that we want because we can't be both, or we can't be a multitude of things to a multitude of people. And then there's like these high expectations that they're sometimes unreachable because they're unrealistic.
Yes.
They're unrealistic. Like you said, when you were doing the cakes, you had to do it at night while the kids were asleep. So you couldn't do both at the same time. But yet you'd wake up in the morning and you would be that, that great mom that you are, and then do it all over again. Right. And so I think there's this misconception that you can't do more than one thing, or you have to wait until the kids are gone. And I just find that it's so encouraging, at least, for me as well, and I've had this conversation recently with friends, and I had this realization that I've lived multiple lifetimes, even in this short period of time that I've been here, going to college, working in the corporate world. Like, those are lifetimes and experiences that I have. And those are memories, and that they contribute to who I am today and where I want to go. And I wouldn't be the person I am today without those experiences. And
they're all building blocks.
It's all building blocks. It's all purposeful, as I say, as Janelle was saying gracefully earlier. And I want to ask, and if you're okay with it, how did your perspective change about relationships and your mindset and yourself when it came to divorce?
So for me, I had such a difficult divorce, and my kids my daughter was 8. I had then an 11-year-old, a 14-year-old. I was completely like just focused on my kids. So when you say relationships, I couldn't even think of dating, of getting into another relationship, because my kids were struggling and had so much going on first of all, they were a full-time job to begin with. And then they were pretty miserable, let's just say, with what was going on with the courts. And so I just focused on them completely. And I kind of really put myself aside. I would never ask or tell any woman to do that. That's my journey. That's, what I went through. I always said, people would come up to me and say, "Oh, are you dating?" And I felt like I was literally in the middle of a war zone. And in my mind, it was if somebody was coming up to somebody in like Vietnam, and they're like in the battlefield and say, "Hey, are you dating?" And I was like, I mean, when do you think I'm supposed to be dating? Everything I was going through consumed me. I couldn't, do anything other than taking care of my kids and dealing with the situation that I had to deal with. So once I was able to completely get through that, then I was able to start healing. I mean, for me, it was a long process. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how you just continue to reinvent yourself, and there's no shame about life. I don't know. Sometimes people, I don't know. I was engaged before and it didn't work out, and I'm glad he's married now with this woman that's a better match for him, and I'm a better match with the person I'm with now, and it's a really beautiful thing. And so I just posted about this, being really resistant to change can just really be so terrible for you, because I think we get so stuck with, well, this is the way the plan was supposed to be, and this is how things are supposed to go. And if they don't, I'm a failure or it won't work out. And I run into that all the time. But change is inevitable.
Yeah,
And usually what you've been avoiding happens anyway. Like you probably
that
do
is
lose that
absolutely
job,
true.
right?
I mean, listen, for me, I say every day, like, my divorce was a blessing in disguise 1,000 times. But first of all, like, I never say I regret my marriage because I have my three amazing children. And so I was meant to be on that journey for whatever reason. I truly believe that. And I'm, grateful that I was married because I wouldn't have had my children. And they are, incredible. And I am so grateful for them. And then, also, like, if I didn't go through the experiences that I had, I don't know that I'd have the drive to, or, to basically, like, I feel a little bit unstoppable. Like, like, I feel like I could do this. Like, because I was always, like, kind of told sometimes by my ex, like, you can't do things, or he wanted me home, he wanted me taking care of him and the kids. And so he would never have wanted to me go out there and, like, build my own business. So that's in the back of my head, pushing me too. So sometimes, like, the negative things propel you forward. And I think for me, it's definitely propelled me forward because after going through, like, a hard period in my life, I have this attitude of, we've one life. Like,
Right.
we've one life. Go for it. Like, when you've had, for people that have had, like, an illness, and they've had, like, where they feel like years taken away from their life, where they were,
Yeah.
like, sick for years, or, I kind of feel like that. Like, and I understand where you kind of feel like after that, you're like, I could do anything, no one, like, I really believe that, like, the world is a canvas and we could create anything. We could do anything. Nobody should ever tell you you can't do something. We're all capable of doing anything we put our minds to. So it's just with whatever passion and drive you have. And sometimes it was a negative thing that propelled you forward. And sometimes people just, are excited, on their own. They didn't need something bad to happen to get them excited to do something and to motivate them. But there's different motivating factors to what brings you sometimes to a certain place.
I love that. And what advice do you have for people that are afraid and are having trouble finding that? Because I know we all have it within ourselves, and we all know, I think when you have a desire to do something, you can,
Yeah.
you have that little seed for a reason. So,
You
because it
know,
can be hard to rebuild. I don't know. I'm transitioning into doing more voiceover, and that's scary because I'm like, oh, again, another mountain, but I know it'll make me so much happier.
but
So
people have fear for different reasons. Like,
right.
sometimes, like, I have a friend, she's the breadwinner of her family. She hates her job, but she's scared to leave her job because she needs that job to pay the bill. So we have to be realistic. Sometimes we do things that we don't like and we can't make changes because we have responsibilities. So that is, part of real life. And hopefully at some point she will be able to change what she's doing or find, happiness in other ways, in other outlets in her life. But, for people that are younger, especially, that don't have, like, the responsibilities, that it's just maybe them, let's say, and they're still scared. They're still scared to take those chances and they don't have those responsibilities. I tell them, like, I say, like, you have one life,
Right.
go for it. The worst that could happen is it doesn't work out,
Right.
and then, you know what? You could try again also. Like, that's the thing, is, like, even if something doesn't work out one time, it doesn't mean you can't even try it a second time. Like, you always, I hear stories about the actors that had the door slammed 1,000
Yes.
times in front of them until they get their break. If they didn't stick with it. Listen, there are so many times I could have given up on this business because it's a tough business, and there's, some people are pretty cutthroat, and you get a lot of, especially, like, I created a new fashion category. There is no, women's necktie category. So I would, sometimes when I was selling online at different stores, they'd say, well, we don't have a category. And so, some of them, they're like, well, we're not going to create one. And other ones, they pushed and pushed and they created one. So, you have to, keep at it. You have
You
to be
do.
and say, I'm going to do this, no matter
Yeah.
who's.
No matter who stops me. And I think what's helped me is taking the ego out of it. Really just staying focused on the mission. Like
Yes.
I tell, there's a story I like to tell my clients. It's like the paperclip method. And it's a story about this guy that, he was working at a bank, I think in Canada. And before he got there, the bank wasn't doing so well. And then he came in with 2 jars, and one had 120 paper clips and the other one was empty. And he just said, I'm going to make 120 calls every day. He'd just pick up a paper clip, make the call, and he would just keep going. And he didn't like let his ego get in the way if somebody denied him. And I forget how much he multiplied that bank's revenue that year, but it was a crazy amount. And it just came down to consistency, and he didn't care about the no's. I would love to know more about being appointed by the President of the United States. What? As a commission member, tell me more about this and everything, how the interest came about, how this even happened.
Okay. It's kind of a crazy situation also, because I never even knew this commission existed. So it's kind of a long story, but after I was actually like towards the end of my divorce craziness, I needed to get away. It was like, either I'm going to check myself into a mental institution because I was going to jump off a bridge, or I just was like, I got to run away. And like, it was my eat, pray, love moment. And my kids were all going to like sleepaway camp. And my older son was working, and I like found him an internship in New York, and and he was really young to do this. I look back and I'm like, I think I was crazy that I sent him to New York to work, and he was really young, but he did. And I knew I needed this so I could take care of my kids. I had to take care of myself. So I went myself to Europe for 3 weeks. And I went to Spain and I went to Italy. I grew up with my father always telling me he would never go to Spain because he were Jewish, and my father and his parents, it's like they still had a grudge against Spain from the Spanish Inquisition, when the time when all the Jews were either killed or forced to convert, or they were kicked out, they were tortured. I mean, it was really like an horrible, horrific period of time for Jewish people. And actually, it's kind of like now, but that's another story. But at that time, so really it changed, where Jews lived in the world. They all had to leave Spain, and the Spanish government never apologized for what they did. And so my grandparents, who really traveled a lot in the world, and my father said they would never go to Spain. And it's kind of a funny thing, because we're not even like aunts, that's not where our relatives came from. But it was just, my dad was a big history buff, and it just like bothered him. And so I kind of had it in me always growing up hearing this, but I decided I was going to Spain anyway. And when I went there, I went on a tour. And I remember being somewhere, and the tour guide was saying, "Oh, this is where we used to burn the Jews when we, during the Inquisition, like la-di-da, this is where we would do it." Like, and I asked them, like, do you have any like memorials or plaques or saying this is like what happened in history? And there was nothing. And, I started doing research, and like, there was just really nothing in Barcelona and Madrid and these big cities where there's just so much devastation happened. And there was nothing to tell the story there. And I became like really like, I walked away and I said, I'm going to do something about this. And I'm going to make sure that there's something at some point in my life. I don't know how, but I'm going to. So probably like after like a year or two after that, maybe it was a year, I don't remember. I was doing a lot of research, and somebody said to me, I found all these Facebook groups. They're like, unless you work in the government, you are never going to be able to do anything. And I thought to myself, well, I don't work in the government. Like, how would, I'm not into government. Like, I'm not really into politics. I follow politics, at that time. Now I'm very into politics. But I was like, okay, like I kind of felt like I have to give up. And I don't like to give up, but I felt like I have to give up. Within probably a month, I met somebody on Zoom. I was helping a friend with something. It was during COVID. And she asked me to be on the Zoom call to help her with something. And I said, sure. And I was on the call with her, and there was another person on the call. He introduced himself, and I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a U.S. Commissioner for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad. And I'm like, what is that? And he explained it to me, and it was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need to do what I want to do. Like, I mean, there was like definitely some like godly intervention here, because this was like too much of a coincidence. And he and I became friends. And then at first he was involved in a restoration project in Egypt. And I became really involved in it. I traveled to Egypt to preserve. It's actually the largest Jewish cemetery in the world is in Egypt. It's the second oldest and it's the largest, and it was under complete devastation and it was being used for sewage. It was just a mess. So I got involved in helping restore that. And finally he turned to me and said, "You should be on this commission." And I was like, "Well, how would I get on this commission? You have to be appointed by the President of the United States." And he said, "Well, do you know your senator?" And, so I reached out to my senator and, shared with him what I was doing. And, I had, a few friends that reach out on my behalf, and they worked to get me on the commission. And it, took a long time. It took a year from the time they started, working for it. But and then I got on the commission, and now I'm just able to do such incredible projects that I'm working on. So it's been really exciting. It's actually one of the most fulfilling things in my life that I've ever done. I think we froze.
I thought Amanda was going to ask a question.
Oh.
But I love that. So out of all the projects that you've been doing, and what a cool story. I always tell people it's weird how things work out. Even I was saying to Amanda that, I was just kind of like, I don't know, my hours are changing with modeling, which is fine. I haven't changed. I'm not allowed to change. I haven't changed in 10 years, the measuring tape. But
I tell people about that all the time, by the way.
It's a weird job. Yeah. And I'm so grateful. But, just things like, the universe and God, how things work. But I'm a kind of a person that always feels like they need to control because that feels safe to me. But when you let go of that and just kind of allow things to happen, not like you really ever have any control, but you think you do.
Right.
I had a friend that I had worked with years ago, and out of the blue, she just called me up and she said, they were describing the type of body type they needed, and you popped into my mind, and I hadn't talked to her in a while. So it was just such a cool thing. It's like I needed a job and I didn't really have to, I'm still showing up for myself and what I do every day. But, I didn't call her. And
right.
So,
sometimes things just fall into your lap, and it's just, I don't know. I really believe some things are meant to be, because the fact that I met somebody that does that. Nobody I know does anything with preservation. And so it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And what's your favorite project you've done so far?
Right now, I don't know if this is my favorite, but it was definitely a fun project. We just worked on a video to share the story of women's basketball, because a lot of it is it's U.S. heritage. And now, March Madness and, women's basketball was such a big thing this month. And my daughter's really into it. So we actually went to the finals game in Cleveland. So she's a big Caitlin Clark fan. My daughter's an incredible basketball player. So I did this project. So the person that started women's basketball, her name is Senda Berenson Abbott, and she was a Jewish girl from Lithuania. And who would have expected that? And this girl, she came to Smith College, and when she was there, she invented women's basketball. It didn't exist. She started the first game. She wrote the rules. The rules have changed over time. So we just did a video, and my Governor Whitmer's in it. And the chair of my commission is Star Jones. She's originally from The View, and she's actually divorce court now. So she's narrates it. And we have the ambassador to Lithuania and the ambassador from Lithuania to the US. They're both in it. So that was really fun. And we're just, trying to get that video out, going viral, just to get that story out, to share some of, the heritage of, of the US heritage of basketball, which was amazing.
And it's really fun to hear how your dad's love of history, he's a history buff, kind of worked into your life in a way that maybe he would be hey, now he might be cool with it to see the beautiful work you're doing,
It's so crazy. I tell him it's because of him and his stubbornness that it's true. It's their grudge that they held. I know. Actually, there's even a crazier story that I really feel like it's almost too crazy to believe this, but I did right around the time that I was appointed to the commission. We did 23. Have you ever done 23andMe? Have you done it? Okay. So we did 23andMe, and it's a very long story, but my grandmother, I was always told, came from Russia when she was 8 years old with her 3 siblings and her parents. And they came here because it was very bad for Jews back in Russia then. There was the pogroms. They were being murdered, tortured, burned, everything. So they had to get out. But I didn't really know. We didn't, that was the story I was told. It was when I was an adult, somebody in Detroit, I met them and they're like, oh, we knew your grandmother. She was the adopted one. And I said, what? Adopted? She wasn't adopted. And they're like, yeah, she was adopted. And found out that my grandmother was not actually siblings with her siblings that she came here with. We heard that they were probably cousins, but I didn't know any details, and we never knew what happened to her family. And, we tried on Ancestry. It was like my life's mission to find my grandmother's family. And I felt like, once when I'm on this commission, somehow maybe I'll get over to Russia, which is actually Ukraine now. It's really Ukraine that she's from. And I could find out what happened. Literally, like within weeks of my first commission meeting, I think it was like the week or two before, my cousin texted me that on 23andMe, they found my grandmother's entire family. And basically, like her parents, my great grandparents, were murdered in a pogrom. They were blown up to pieces. And her sibling, who was 14, raised her and her other siblings until she was 8. And they were, absolutely had nothing. They lived on potato peels. Completely tragic story. But they saved her life by having her aunt and uncle adopt her and bring her to the United States. That entire family's been looking for her for 90 years. So I've had reunion after family reunion. But during that time of one of the reunions, I met with my dad's first cousin who's alive, who he's never met. And he said to me that he has been working on preserving the cemetery. He takes care of all the cemeteries in Ukraine where the family came from. And he found out that Antony Blinken's family is also from there and buried in the same mass grave as some of my relatives that were murdered. And so he was trying to get a hold of our Secretary of State to, help preserve this. And I was like, literally that day, week, I received, I could even show you, it's like back here, my, document, it's on my wall there, signed by President Biden and Antony Blinken. So I was like, this is crazy. So that is going to be my next project, is to preserve this, preserve this cemetery where there's a mass grave because the Nazis came in and killed my great aunt, and his family is listed that they are buried there as well. So as soon as things clear up in Ukraine and it's safer to go over there, that is what I plan to do. Which is wild.
It's so wild and so amazing, and it's so important to preserve history, and we all know this. And it's like, well, duh, Janelle, but something I really picked up from my dad, because he's a journalist.
Oh, wow.
And also my mother, is that he's just like, everybody's story needs to be told, and it does exist. Like, it just does. Just wiping out a story you don't want to hear is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And my mother actually changed the school system for people with special needs, specifically autism, because they weren't giving speech services to kids in the 90s. And that's very important for all of us to be able to talk.
Yes.
And she
She did that in the 90s. That's impressive.
It's so impressive. And the doctor told her, your son will always be in his own world. Carry on a normal life with your daughter. This is impossible. But then she met these other parents and a psychologist. It's like, well, if you don't get him the services he needs in the next few years, he'll never talk. Now he doesn't stop talking, but
My son didn't speak until he was 4. I had the same thing. Well, in sentences, he was like speaking, but you couldn't understand him.
Right.
And so I experienced a lot of that.
It's like, so many people are going through it, but it still feels like a battle just by yourself. And what she taught me too is you have to be able to talk to people, unfortunately, sometimes that you hate, to make change. And hate's a strong word, but they were being pretty mean. They were being like, we don't want your son here. So like, it's just like, you went up to that guy that was like, yep, this in Spain. He was like, yeah, this is where everything happens,
Totally.
And you still went up and talked to him. And that seems like such a simple thing, but it's not. And now look at all the beautiful work you're doing. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, we don't have too much more time.
Okay.
Now we're going to switch into Nandani, and I want you to tell me everything about that you can in like 10 minutes, but also how it's like disrupting the fashion industry in a good way and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been really exciting. One of the things I love about ties is it's funny, I actually always liked them. My dad's colorblind. So as a kid, that was my thing. Every night, he used to wear a suit and tie every day to work. I would pick out his tie to match his suits. And so I was always like tie shopping with him and playing with ties. And I never really thought about them for me. But in the 90s, became, kind of cool for women to wear ties. And I actually I posted the other day a picture I think it was like one of the first nights in college. I went out with my roommates and I'm wearing a tie. So it was really fun to find that picture. And one of the things I like about it, it's pretty empowering when you put on a tie. You kind of feel like, okay, like there's just like this, it gives you a little boost of confidence. And so I like it as a fashion accessory, but I also like what it does to you a little bit mentally. And, especially when women, sometimes they're in the boardroom with a lot of men and they're in their ties. And, there's something about putting on your tie too and saying, hey, like, cause, I'm sorry, but men still look at women differently in the boardroom. We've got to prove ourselves over and over again. And I feel like it just gives you this little bit of confidence. But what I really liked about the idea behind it as well is that, okay, you know what? Men's ties are boring. I mean, they are like, here's like an accessory. If like it was women that were wearing them, we would have done so many fun things with them by now. Like you go to a store, like, over time, like the styles have maybe shifted a little bit from a wider to more narrow tie, but they look pretty much the same. That's why most men don't even wear ties anymore. I think they're just, it's getting kind of old and they're sick of the style. It hasn't changed. It hasn't been modernized. And I was like, you know what? Women can do anything they want with these ties. So right now I'm wearing it more traditional, like but I could wear them with something low cut and, inside the shirt, or you could wear it, over a dress, a tank top, anything with jeans. You could dress it up, evening wear. Whereas a man is not going to, do that. So we just have like so many more fun ways. It's a fun accessory for women. So I got to like kind of, my creative part of me that I enjoy the designing of it, which I really love. Some of them are really intricate, and we have a lot of ones with like beadwork, and then I have a lot that are really feminine. I have ones with like bows that you wear on the side of your neck that always have like a little bit of the tie element, so it kind of goes off into a tie. But so they're really, it's not just like to have like a more masculine look, because some of them are. I have like a range of it. So that was also, I wanted to be the tie brand, so the luxury tie brand that's not just all one look. And so if you want something simpler, there's something more traditional. If you want a simple black tie, if you want something, more fun, I'm wearing, a denim tie with some, embellishments, or if you went to something beautiful and romantic, a bow, I have all different, styles. So the creative part has been really fun for me, but breaking into this new fashion category is fun, exciting, and challenging. You have to open people's minds to it. One of the other things is I did design all of them so they're pre-tied. So you just put it on like a necklace. And I think that was the first thing for women is, you might see a tie in a magazine, but the first thought for a woman is most women don't know how to tie a tie. And the women that do know how get very offended when I say that, but most women don't. We have surveyed them and I have asked women. And so it's really, it lends itself. So it's just really, like I said, as easy as putting a necklace on, just put it on, snap it, it's adjustable. But it's hard for women there are a lot of women think, well, I never wore a tie before. So, I don't know how to do that, or I wouldn't know how to style it. And for someone, because I love styling clothes, or for people, like I kind of took for granted that people would realize you could wear it any which way, but they actually do. A lot of them want to be shown. And so that was one of the, the other things is that I have to, realize that it's a teaching, you have to really show people and demonstrate different ways to wear them. So that's part of the process, but it's also like stores, when I've met with different stores, they're like, we love these, but we don't sell ties. Or they'll say, well, we're not selling ties for men. So I don't think we would start for women. So it's hard. You hear a lot of those things, but then, I have stylists that are pulling them left and right. I had somebody who's doing a Vogue for shoot, calls me out of reached me like, I don't know how long ago, it was maybe a month or two ago. So they were doing this big shoot for Vogue and Elle magazine, and they wanted to use my ties. And so like, it's been amazing that way. Like I've just gotten like, a lot of really, great excitement from people in the industry about the ties, and So that's been like what's keeping me going, even though, like, some of the traditional stores that only sell certain things are saying, this is, too avant-garde for us. The people in the actual industry, they love it. And we find the right consumers, like I had somebody the other day that ordered 9 ties. So there's people out there that just like love ties, and, they are looking for that something different. So we have a bridal line now, and some of them, like I said, are, for like they're bows, and they're like romantic looking. And then there's some that are more traditional where they're like all white, and it's for somebody, maybe a same sex couple. And one of the women wants to wear a suit, and where's she going to find a beautiful white embellished handmade tie? So we're trying to like really create ties for everyone.
My first tie I wore in middle school jazz band. And I thought it was so cool because we all came out with our ties. And
Yeah.
I definitely love wearing a suit. I just feel really powerful in a suit. And I have quite a few. So I love that. And just this is so authentic to you and so genuine. And there's such a beautiful story that goes along with it. And I want to encourage our listeners with that, because I always say authenticity beats out scarcity. Because if you just keep focusing on what lights you up and who you are, you're going to find the work. There's going to be work for you. I just don't think you want something so badly if there's nothing for you. So can you tell us more about, like, was there any fear around niching down into that, or you just didn't care? You're like, this is what I'm doing and you're all going to love it.
Oh, the second one. I was just, at that point in my life where I'm like, I'm just going to do this. And there's, if I really like sat down and like weighed the pros and cons and made 2 lists of, I never would have done it, because it would have been a million reasons, to say like, you're crazy. Like, how are you going to do this? And I just did it. And I just, I went for it. I, met people, I talked to people, I, got advice, I listened, I tried to surround myself with, good people. And I took chances, and, some of them didn't work, and I moved on. That's like what if I tell some of the things didn't work out, or I met someone that, tried to work with somebody and they were not, the greatest person in the end. And you know what? Part ways and you move on. And whatever it is in the industry, as you'll hear from anybody, the fashion industry is a cutthroat, difficult industry. But you have to have, you have to have some thick skin, and you have to be able to, just keep going. And, there's a woman, her name is Karen Giberset from the Accessories Council, which I'm involved with. And she always says to me, she's like, Nancy, keep going. She's like, it is not, it's a marathon. It's not, like a sprint. So it's like, it's not one of those things that like in a month, you're going to be, where you want to be. You have to just keep at it. And so she's been very encouraging to me, because I know, she loves our ties, and she's like, just keep going. So she's one person that I've gone to, and I'm like, should I give up? Should I give up? And she's like, no. So yes, it's good to have somebody like that keeps you going, because there's moments where you're like, oh my God. But right when we launched, we did New York Fashion Week. And so I've done it for the last 2 years. And that was just so exciting. And it kind of brought me back to almost like my theater days, being behind stage and getting things ready. Like, I love that. So the excitement of New York Fashion Week, that just like, that kind of propels me. I'm like, I'm going to do this. Like when you see, people wearing your ties, walking the runways, loving them, styling them in so many different ways, that, that was exciting. And so we've had, a lot of like real positives with it. And one thing I do want to share about the brand is, so like our logo, or actually I have a little logo here. It's like on one of the little pouches. It's like 2 elephants intertwined. And so it's like on, obviously like on the inside of all of the ties. And one of the things, people ask me, what is the story with this logo? And I've always loved elephants. And I love them because they're the strongest animals, but they're also empathetic animals. And that's the thing is like, women now, to wear a tie, which is traditionally a male tie, we could lead, we could be strong, but women have empathy. Most women, where sometimes that's missing from some male genes, is the empathy gene, or how men, do business or lead. Like sometimes that's not there. You see that in politics, or So the idea behind this is, I want women to feel strong, but I want them to, to be empathetic still in this world. They don't have to be cutthroat. They don't, they could be there for other people. And it's two elephants intertwined, so that, people, obviously symbolic of a tie, but also that we should be all tied together. Like, people have to care about other people. It shouldn't just be like every man for themselves. Like, we all live in a society, in a community together, and we have to care about each other, whether it's in business. And I feel like that's how people should always lead, with that mindset of caring for others and contributing to other people.
I love that. And I'm so grateful that I got to model for your company, because that aligns with a lot of my core beliefs. So once again, one of those cool things where, you find each other.
Yes. I love every time we use your photos. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, thank you. I saw them. I was like, hey, these are pretty good.
Use them. I love them. Yeah.
It's funny with modeling. I kind of have to like black out or pretend I'm some type of character, because then I like kind of just do it. And then 2 days later, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed.
Your pictures are beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have to close out here, but I would love if you could close out with, you have a background in marketing, and a lot of creatives are afraid of marketing. So what advice do you have for them? Because business is business, and you have to market and you have to know your customer, but we run into a lot of creatives that are afraid of that.
Well, it's interesting to say I have a background in marketing. So when I was working in marketing, it was before social media. So marketing is completely shifted. And so that's, I will say, for me, that's probably my biggest challenge. Is I don't mind taking photographs, but I'm not the type of person that wants to be on camera all day long, like promoting my business. And that is something that I'm constantly being told I need to, put out reels and TikToks and do all that. And that's my greatest challenge. So I will share what I'm being told with everyone else, is that you have to just put yourself out there. That's just part of it. That you have to know what marketing is today is different than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's in marketing, it's just changing every like few months. It changes. 1 minute someone's telling you, you need to be on TikTok, and then they're like, no, you need to be on Instagram. They're like, no, not anymore. LinkedIn. So that's the social media aspect is changing. But in terms of the marketing, is just finding a clear message. What is your message? Sticking to it, and it has to be authentic, and getting that message out. Don't pretend to be something you're not. I believe it's like, as long as you're authentic and doing what you're passionate about, that's going to come out.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
You're
Oh my gosh.
welcome.
I've loved every bit of this interview, and we'll definitely list everything of how people can find your beautiful ties and you and all that you're doing, and support the Commission for Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad, all these things. Do you have any final words for our listeners?
Thank you so much for having me. This was just like so wonderful. And I'm so glad we met and connected in this way. And, for the listeners, I just want to tell them that, two like, main takeaways is, one is like, don't let, the time in your life define how you're going to lead your entire life. Like, if something's going on in your life now and you're like, I can't do this because for whatever reason, I don't have the finances to invest in this business now, or I'm busy with children, or I one day want to start a family, or whatever it is. Don't think you have to ever give up on that dream, because we're living longer now, and you could do something when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. There's people that, like, I know somebody in his 80s who's just still in college. He's been going to college for years. He just loves taking classes and signs up every year. So, don't let it's not just your age, but the period of like your life define what you're going to do forever. So that's like number one. And the other is, you've got one life. You've got one life. Do what you want to do and feel passionate about.
Well, thank you. I love that. I'm going to take that. I'm going to write that down. Look at that every morning. It's so true. And it's sometimes it's hard to forget that, because like you said, you can kind of get caught up in things, but I always try to find the balance. I think the best thing I learned, I'm in this like class that teaches me about how to prioritize and leverage your time better.
We all need that.
We all need it. And they have you write in the good stuff first, the time with your family. and the self-care and the stuff that you want to do, you know, within reason.
Right.
And then it shows you really how much time you have left for work. And it's pretty interesting. Then you actually work a little faster than you knew you could. So it's really neat. But
that's great.
Thank you so much for coming on. And
Thank you.
everybody will put the links below. And yes, all right, we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts about this episode?
Drop it in the comments and let us know what you want to dive into next.
Subscribe, like, share, and click the link below to book a free consultation. And
We'll see you next time.